Question. Who is the most important person in this room? You're right. You are the most important person in this room. You are the most important person in your world. This entire universe of billions of planets revolves around you. Nothing else in the world has any meaning except for the meaning you give it. You are the most important person. And as we said before, how important you think you are determines everything that happens to you. If you consider yourself to be an important person, you set bigger goals. If you consider yourself to be a more important person, you persist longer. You set higher standards. You strive for excellence. If you think that you're an important person, you treat other people as though they're important as well. And they treat you as though you're important back. So how important you feel you are, as we said before, your level of self-esteem is the most important statement about you. And the wonderful thing is that the more you practice these principles, the more you think about what you want, the more you plan for it, the more you work toward it, the better you get at your work, the better you feel about yourself, and the more important you feel you are. So you actually build yourself up. Just like if you wanted to become physically fit, you do physical work, you work out with your body. If you want to become mentally fit, you do some of the things we're talking about today. Now, second question is this. What is the most important part of today, this seminar? What's the most important part of the seminar? Not a trick question. The answer is what you do afterwards. You see, it's the actions that you take that make the difference between success and failure. Successful people take action, unsuccessful people don't. Successful people hear something and they move on it. Unsuccessful people hear the same thing and they say, well, I'm going to do something about that someday. And they live in a vacation place called Someday Isle. And they sit there and they sit in the sun and they say, someday I'll read that book. Someday I'll go to that course. Someday I'll make a decision to be one of the best in my field and work at it every day. But they live on Someday Isle and they never do it. So it's really important, if you hear something good, you act on it. Now, I said this morning that the first part we would talk about the psychology of selling. The psychology we've talked about, you become what you think about most of the time. If we asked top salespeople what they think about most of the time, one of the things they think about is selling more stuff. They think about selling all the time. They get up in the morning and they think about selling, and they think about selling all day long. And they think about selling in the evening, and they think about selling on the way home, and they think about selling on the weekend. Now, many people think, well, you know, when I finish work, I don't like to think about my work. Well, that's okay. It just means that you have no future. Because that would be the same as saying, well, when I'm at work, I don't like to think about my family. You know, I like to just sort of leave that as another part of my life. The fact is that your family and you are part 24 hours a day. You think about it all the time. If you're in the right field, you think about it all the time. So then we say, well, what are the things that top salespeople think about in selling? And we talk about the psychology of selling. Now, there's several things we could talk about in the next hour, and I want to talk about some of the most important. Basically, I said there's 7 key parts of selling, 7 key result areas. And the 7 key result areas determine your success or failure. Wherever you're strong, you'll be doing well. Wherever you're weak, it'll be holding you back. And your job is to identify where you're strong and do more of it, and identify where you're weak and bring it up. Okay, it's a real simple process, but it's all you have to do to move to the top of your field is keep working on the skills that are holding you back and keep maximizing the skills that are getting you there. Now, the 7 skills are, number 1 is prospecting. You have to have someone to talk to. Now, let's talk about prospecting a little bit. Prospecting, we say that the key to success in selling means spending more time with better prospects. Spend more time with better prospects. Spend more time with people who are more likely to buy. And there is a sales funnel that I want to show you, and the sales funnel is like this. And the rule is that there are 3 parts of selling. There are prospecting, and that's the first part of the sales funnel. And then the second part is presenting, showing your product. And that's the second part of the funnel. And the third part is following up and closing. So I'll just say follow up and close. And this is phase 3. Now, your job is to keep this hopper full all the time. And the 80-20 rule applies. Spend 80% of your time prospecting and presenting, and only 20% of your time presenting and following up. Spend 80% of your time prospecting and presenting until your hopper is full. Now let us say that this is a ratio of 20 to 5. You have to call on 20 people to get 5 people that you can see personally. And let's say the ratio then, for every 5 people you talk to personally, we have 2 that you can follow up with, and of these 2, 1 turns into a sale. So what is your ratio of calls to sales? It's 20 to 1, okay? You have to see 20 people to make a sale. Now you have 2 jobs from now on. Number 1 is keep the hopper full. Keep the hopper full so that you always have lots of people to talk to. And number 2 is get better at your key skills. Get better at prospecting. Get better at presenting. Get better at following up and closing. A small improvement in your prospecting so that you spend more time with better prospects is going to increase the quality of the people you talk to. A small improvement in presenting is going to increase the number of people you follow up with, and a small improvement in closing will increase your sales so you can actually go from 20 to 1, where you are today, to 10 to 1 very quickly. If you go from 20 to 1 to 10 to 1, what will happen? You'll double your income. So you must always be looking for ways to prospect better. And I want to tell you an interesting concept about prospecting, and it has to do with high probability prospect versus low probability prospects. I got a question here from Anthony, and Anthony says a very common objection here in Singapore is that the economy is bad. How do we solve this objection? Anybody heard that? The economy is bad? Say yes. Yes. Okay. It's a good reason for not buying, but are people buying food? Are people buying clothes? Are people buying homes? Are people buying cars? Are people buying... Remember, when there's 5% unemployment, there's 95% employment. And so the economy is down a little bit, but the main problem is dealing with poor prospects. So with prospects, you have 2 types. You have what we call high probability prospects and low probability prospects. Now, what is a high probability prospect? Well, someone is very close to buying when you meet them. If you sell hamburgers and you meet a person who's really hungry, that's a good prospect. If you sell cars and you meet a person who's looking for a car right now, that's a good prospect. If you're selling life insurance and you meet a person who just had a young child and wants to provide for their future, that's a good prospect. My throat just went dry. It's unbelievable. So the other end of the spectrum is excuse me. The other end of the spectrum is low probability prospects. People are a long, long way from buying. And here's what we know. It's sort of like a thermometer. Is everybody you meet is somewhere in here. Your job is to spend more time with prospects that are up here. So your job is to spend more time with people who can and will buy your product or service in a reasonable period of time. And so at the beginning, you need to sort out prospects from high probability to low probability. So what is a high probability prospect? Number 1, they have a need for what you're selling right now. Okay? If they say, I don't need it, I don't want it, I can't use it, I can't afford it, business is bad, I'm broke, and I have no future, this is not a good prospect. So people say, well, how can I sell to these people? You can't! It's like selling hamburgers to a person who just ate. They're not hungry. So the first thing you need to do is you need to say, who are the people in my market who most need my product? One of the changes that have taken place in the last few years is about 2 or 3 years ago, when business was booming, everybody was buying, is that there were more buyers than there were sellers. An idiot could be successful in selling. I work for a company that has 4,000 salespeople. It does $3 billion a year. One of the top companies in the world. The beginning of last year, not this year, but last year, they invited me to Las Vegas to speak to their top 20% of salespeople, 800. They brought them to Las Vegas, and they had them in one of these great casinos that cost $1 billion. I mean, has anybody ever been to Las Vegas? It's a most amazing, don't go. It's a most amazing place. They had this great celebration because in the year 2000, these people had had a fabulous year, all right? And they brought the top 20%, set them up in the hotel, 3 days, dinners, ta-da, okay? 3 months later, this is in April of 2001, the vice president of marketing called me and said, we have a real problem. These people can't sell. I said, what do you mean you can't sell? They sold $3 billion worth last year. He said, we found that when the market turned down and people weren't simply calling up and buying, these people didn't even know how to make an appointment. They didn't know how to sell. They didn't know how to make presentations. They didn't know how to sell against higher or lower priced competition. They don't know how to sell. We have a real disaster on our hands. And he literally said, is there any way you can do, anything you can do to help us? And he went out and he was literally on the road for the next year, just traveling around, bandaging up wounded sales forces. Because he said, these people who we thought were our superstars can't sell anything. So your job is to realize that the market has changed. It used to be that there were more customers than there were salespeople. Now there's more salespeople than there are customers. It used to be you could machine gun the market, and now you have to rifle the market. You have to pick your shots very carefully. You have to be more focused. You have to do more preparation when you're dealing with customers. You have to give more thought to who it is who can use your product or service. And you have to work harder to get appointments with key people. You can't just rush out at the market like a dog chasing a rabbit across a field. You have to be very, very focused. That's one of the things that I have learned in the last couple of years. It requires a complete mind shift. So you have to ask yourself, who is a high probability prospect? Number one is they need your product or service. Number two, they can afford it. They have the money. You don't call on bankrupt .com businesses and try to make sales, because they're thinking of killing themselves. You know, they're not thinking of buying what you have to offer, and even if they do buy it, they can't pay for it. So you also want a company, you want people who like and respect your industry and your business, and best of all, people who like and respect you. You want to deal with people who are decisive and who can make a decision. I have a friend who went through my program a couple of years ago and went straight to the top of his business in the next year. And it was with one idea. I said to him that you need to make sure that the person you're talking to can and will buy from you within a reasonable period of time. Don't keep calling back on people who won't buy or who can't buy. So he started doing this. He wrote me a letter. He said 1 year later he had tripled his income from 30,000 US to 90,000 US, and he had become the #1 person in his industry. Whenever he met with a prospect, he would say, oh, by the way, if I show you something that you really like, or if you really like what I'm showing you, what sort of time frame would you be thinking about for making a decision? Pretty honest question. And people will tell you. They'll say, well, within a few weeks or a couple of months or by the end of the summer. Or, well, we're kind of looking right now, we're gathering information. He found that every customer he'd had in the last 3 or 4 years had bought within 90 days. Almost everyone had bought within 90 days of the first meeting. So that was his outside line. If a person says that they're thinking of making a decision within 2 or 3 months, good. He would work on them and spend time with them. If they said they were thinking of making a decision next year, they were just gathering information, remember, what companies will do is they'll have somebody who's not busy. And they'll say, well, why don't you call around and get some information on this product or service. See if it's available, how much people are asking for it, and so on. So they call you up and they say, I'm calling from big company, and I want to know how much what are your products or services? And you say, oh, well, could you come and give me a presentation? Oh, yes, yeah. And you get there and there's 3 or 4 of your competitors sitting in the waiting room. These people are just gathering information. And so therefore he would always ask, what sort of, good, even on the phone, by the way, what sort of time frame are you looking at for making a decision? If it was within 2 or 3 months, he would go to work on them. If it was beyond 2 or 3 months, he'd say, well, let me introduce you to one of the people in my office who has no future. And you can spend time with him. Now, I don't know how it works in Singapore, but let me tell you something that changed my life when I was working here in Southeast Asia. I used to finish a sales presentation, and the person would say, well, let me think it over. And I would say, okay, I'll call back. Or he would say, let me think it over, and you get back to me later. And I used to accept, okay, I'll get back to you later, you think it over. I want to think it over, by the way, are the words for goodbye forever. When a person says, I want to think it over, they don't think it over, they say goodbye forever. So finally one day, I got so tired of this, I said, I'm sorry, I don't make callbacks. What? I don't call back. Because I've told you everything that I can possibly tell you already. So now at this moment, you know everything you need to know to make a decision. There is no more information. So either it's a good idea for you or it's not a good idea, but there's no point in thinking it over because you know everything there is already. So why don't you just take it? And the person said, well, all right. And I went to the next office and I said the same thing. Well, let me think it over. I don't make callbacks. Well, then I'll take it. And I went to the third office. I made 3 sales in 25 minutes. I was making, what, 1 or 2 sales a week. I made 3 sales in 25 minutes. I almost died. I had to run and go to the bathroom. I was so excited. And then I realized it was me that was causing the problem. As soon as the person says, well, let me think it over, I say, okay, you think it over. Yay, think it over, think it over. Then I spent half my life going back. And as soon as I walked out the door, they went into a 3-year meeting. Do you know what a 3-year? Yes, right. You've been calling them for 3 years. They're still in a meeting, right? I'm sorry, he's still in a meeting. You know. I know. I've been there. I said I don't make callbacks. Now, as time passed, I became more successful. I'm selling much bigger projects, especially training programs and so on. People would say, "Well, can you do a proposal for us?" And so I wrote a few proposals. Oh, these were beautiful proposals. I spent hours writing them and rewriting them. I'd send them in, and it might as well have been throwing them off the edge of the earth because they disappeared. I said, "Did you get my proposal?" Well, it's here somewhere. We didn't have a chance to read it. How about a month later? Well, we lost it. Could you send it again by Federal Express? So I'd send it again. A week or 2 weeks would go by. Did you get my proposal? Well, we're looking at a lot of proposals right now, and yours looks really good. And so we're going to compare it with others. Finally, the next time someone said, would you do a proposal for us? I said, I don't do proposals. You don't do proposals? No. If you want to do business together, we'll discuss it. I'll write you a letter of intent that outlines the agreement, but I don't do proposals. Well, all right then. You don't do proposals. All the others do proposals. I said, I don't do proposals. I do follow-up letters of agreement. Well, I never heard such a thing. When are you planning to make a decision anyway? Well, we're just looking at it for the next few years. You know, we're really not in the market right now. And so, I have never done another proposal, and I never make callbacks. And you know something? My sales doubled and tripled and quadrupled. And all my friends are busy doing proposals. They're still waiting to hear back. Anyway, we create most of our problems. So with a high probability prospect, you can say, how soon would you be making a decision? Or if I show you exactly what you're looking for, or if I show you something that you really like at a price that really makes sense to you, when would you be thinking of making a decision? So you want people that need it, that want it, that can afford it, that can make a decision, that like you, that respect you, and so on. Now, what is the best part of selling? Psychologically, mentally, what's the best part of selling? I'll tell you what it is. It's making sales. If you're having trouble with that answer, you're in the wrong field. It's the feeling of winning that we have from making sales. It's when we feel happy. We make a sale and we feel happy. It releases endorphins in our brain. It makes us feel high. We feel cheerful. We feel wonderful about ourselves when we make sales. That's the key to our business. What's the downside of selling? What's the psychological negative of selling? It's dealing with difficult people. It's long, drawn-out meetings. It's not making sales. It's working hard and not succeeding. We love to succeed. We hate the feeling of not succeeding. So what is the problem in selling? It's working with people who are down here, low probability prospects. By the way, when you work with low probability prospects, you know what happens? It wears you down. It tires you out. And you even start to think about quitting. And we did some research on you before tonight, and we find there are people in this very room who have thought about quitting. We know who you are.